Hello, everybody. This is April with the Everything Considered podcast, and today I have Bradley Lovell with me. And Bradley is a very interesting person. We're going to learn a lot about him. I happen to be strolling through our local farmers market, and I've seen him before, but then I saw some of his beautiful work with wood, and we'll touch on that. But for now, welcome, Bradley. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, April. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, so I got a little bio from you, and I'd like to hear a little bit about who you are and talk about some of your adventures and travel. So let's just start there.
Okay, well, I should preface with I often feel nervous speaking about myself, so
I
I'll try
understand.
to I'll try
That's
to
why I
slow it
interview
down a bit.
people.
Um, I am 33 years old. I was born and raised in Texas. Had a typical upbringing and went to university. Graduated from university and quickly realized that a job in corporate America in finance was not what I wanted to be doing all my life.
Mhm.
So I began saving money and I left the country to go to South America when I was 22, 23, and lived down there for about a year and a half. And that really was the beginning of a journey that's still happening today, a process of purification, of going
Mhm.
deeper, and a process of expression. And it's led me to a bunch of other adventures, inside and out. And now I'm here in Georgia. My folks live here, and I like being close to them.
Mhm.
And I'm trying to figure out my place in the world. I think for the past decade, I was very much on the fringe of the world and
Mhm.
not just not I was actively participating in it, but I always felt like there was a lot of space between me and the world. And now I'm jumping into it and trying to see where the pieces fall.
Right. Right. I totally understand that. I'm like a lot older than you. And I think I've spent most of my life just on adventures, so I totally can relate to that. Whereabout did you live in South America?
I started in Peru,
Okay.
and great story. I went down there. I read a book about ayahuasca, and
Mhm.
I emailed the author and I said, "How did you have these very authentic experiences down there with the natives and out in the middle of nowhere?" And he emailed me back and said, "I'll put you in touch with someone." And I ended up going down there, and we were in the middle of nowhere. I say we, me and a buddy of mine, we went to the
Mhm.
middle of nowhere in the Amazon jungle with the Matsis Indian tribes, and we stayed with them for a couple weeks,
Mhm.
doing a bunch of different types of plant medicines, including ayahuasca, and very memorable kickoff to my journey in South America.
I bet.
Yeah, and ended up moving to Chile after, the southern Antarctic part of Chile, where I
Okay.
lived for about a year managing, a hostel down there and working in the famous national park down there, Torres del Paine, beautiful park.
Wow. Wow. So how long were you in South America then?
That round, I was in about a year and a half, about 18 to 20 months, something like that,
Yeah. So did you have
and
quite an experience with Aya then? Like, that was a very eye-opening?
yes,
Yeah.
yes, it was a lot of physical purging, but
Mhm.
also a lot of mental purging and
Mhm.
emotional purging.
Mm.
Um, actually, I was slotted to do 5 ceremonies, and on the 4th one, she had told me, "Okay, that's enough for you for now. You're done. You don't need to do the 5th. That's fine."
Mhm.
And I took that, and my message was really starting to go inwards, like, "Okay,
Mhm.
you've had a bunch of these psychedelic experiences because I had done, pretty intense, psilocybin trips before that,
Right.
and, it was like, "Okay, now put all those things aside and try to learn how to meditate, how to go
Mhm.
inward, and really start feeling more and more and more." And so that
Yeah.
started that inward process without the use of entheogens.
Yes. Yes, they have a place. but ultimately we can get there, with or without them. I think they have
Mhm.
they're a beautiful way to kind of be initiated into that process. So, uh,
Definitely
yeah,
gave me a new reference point.
yeah, yeah,
This isn't everything that exists. There are more layers, dimensions, whatever,
yeah.
right in front of me.
I think that's the biggest hurdle for a lot of people is, there's such a separation in terms of, our awareness of something outside of the linear physical realm. And we're not, we're conditioned away from it. I think as children we have more of a connection, but as time goes on, we get very conditioned away from that awareness. So, um,
Definitely, we get barraged with all sorts of conditionings, huh? Just
yeah,
and the
yeah,
patterns we inherit from our parents and their parents, like these generational traumas and curses, they they're deeply embedded in our cells.
yeah, they really are. And it's a lot. I mean, I didn't really start my so-called awakening journey till I was in my 40s. But I had a lot of adventures before then. Just I for me, and I we might talk a little bit about human design if you don't mind. Uh,
Absolutely.
just dip into there. For me, I'm a line 3, so I am what's called the martyr, and we experiment with everything. So I experimented with all the structures and found them to be faulty and
Mm.
everything on the outside. So I finally, after being banged up quite a bit, turned inward, and it's been an incredible journey. So I can relate. I wish I would have started in my 20s. That would have been really cool.
But you know what? Like when we zoom in and we see,
Mhm.
oh man, I started in my 40s, I started in my 20s, whatever. But when we zoom out, this is like the
It's
billionth life
perfect.
we've been living. And it's like, okay, 20 years on a time frame that we can't even fathom. It's like, who cares?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
doing the work towards something in the end. And whether we get there, you know, in this
Wherever we
life, next
start.
life, that life, we're just slowly making steps toward there. And it's a long path, is what I'm finding, a very
Yes.
long path.
Yeah, it seems short, but in retrospect, you're right. Looking back at previous incarnations and all the hurdles that you have to overcome with conditioning, it's quite an adventure.
Mhm.
So you left South America, and then where did you go? Did you come back to the States?
I did. I came back to the States, worked on a goat farm for some time,
Cool.
saved a little bit of money, and rode out on a rainy day on my bicycle out west, and from Carrollton, Georgia, and I started riding west and ended up in Arkansas, and had a very adventurous summer. Went down to Texas, got
Wow.
work. I'm working random jobs, really fun jobs, and all the way ended up in Oregon by fall. So I went cross country, and
Okay.
uh, yeah, learned a lot that go around. Um,
Mhm,
But still, like, fell into old patterns, I remember. Like, I wasn't meditating as consistently as I wanted to be, and I
mhm,
was still falling into old patterns, and this was in 2014, and I remember in
mhm.
2015, I took a 10-day silent retreat, and that was life-changing for me.
Wow.
Uh, a Vipassana retreat I took, and
Yes. I've always wanted to do that. I did a 3-day one time with my best friend, and we didn't make it, but 2 days. Don't go with your best friend.
yeah, that would make it a little more challenging, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but that's incredible. What did you learn from 10 days of silence? If you it's
I
hard to sum up, I'm sure.
No, well, I've thought of this a lot, and I can get into some deeper parts of it because I actually ended up later living and managing one of those meditation centers for several years. And but that first go around, it was really a homecoming, April. I had come
Mhm.
home back into my body. I think a big part of the journey of awakening is how much you can actually embody yourself. How much can you feel? And there's so many layers to what you can feel and
Yeah.
how subtle you can start feeling.
Mm,
Um, and I hit some threshold in that course. I remember it was on day 6, and it was every evening there's a discourse. And that evening after the meditation, I was in a sea of vibrations and almost felt held.
mm,
And I just felt like, finally, this is what I had been looking for so long. All this questing to the end of the world, going across country, all this. was for this, to finally
Mm,
find this. And it was me all along, right? But
right.
I didn't have the tools to like really feel like very fully within my body and be here. And when a person feels deeply within their body, they can't be thinking simultaneously. They're like two
Right.
sides of the same coin. You cannot
Mhm.
think and feel at the same time. And when I'm
Right.
feeling that deeply, the thinking mind just shuts off finally. I
Mm,
can be here, not be pulled into the past or pulled into the future. And so that's what I got out of that, that, okay, I proved to myself that I can do this without entheogens, without psychedelics.
mhm.
And here's the way to do that. Here's
Mm,
a structure, a path on how to get more present, essentially.
right. Right.
So
Yeah,
that was what I took away from it.
that's the mind, in human design, we teach about the mind not being the authority, that that wisdom is embodied,
Mm.
and that your authority is in the body, not the mind. And it's the biggest hurdle for people to wrap their heads around.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
that the mind has a role, which is that of the passenger, and all it really needs to do is sit back and relax and let the vehicle, which is the embodied authority, take it wherever it's supposed to go. But it really wants to get into the driver's seat.
Golly, it loves the driver's seat,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
I don't know when that happened, when the mind was given a control over that, but
Yeah.
man, it's a tough pattern to break, and, I'm certainly not there, but I've had glimpses and, work on it every day to come back and be the witness more and
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be a struggle to not identify with the ruminations of what's going on in the mind. But once you're aware that that's not where truth is found,
Yes.
you can become more of a witness. But I think it's just a process of learning to do that. And it sounds like you really have dove into that deeply, which I think I admire greatly. I think that's a beautiful, everybody has a different way of getting there. And
Yeah.
it sounds like it's been a pretty big adventure for you finding that space.
It has been a big adventure, but a lot of the impetus for me going into these realms is suffering. It's like, wow, I'm
Mm,
really suffering inside, and it's hard to even articulate, hard to express to other people the kind of like suffering that I'm experiencing. And it's a suffering I think at the root we're all experiencing. It's
yes.
the suffering of just existing, of impermanence, that
Mhm.
nothing is ever going to last. Everything we
Right.
love, all the people we love, all the experiences we love, they're all fading into nothingness every moment. And there's
Yeah.
like a deep it's almost like built into the system. The suffering is built into the system, and
Yeah.
it's like an itch you can't scratch, and I just
Right.
had to understand it more and realize that the suffering is just the mind. It's clinging. It's the mind clinging. It's the mind pushing
Mhm.
away, pulling. And if the like you said, if the mind can just sit in the passenger seat without trying to direct the traffic or direct the driver,
Yeah.
it can unfold the way nature wants to unfold it, which is without any impediments and any resistance.
Yes.
And that's a really beautiful thing. It's like I have all these knots inside me. We all have all these tension points that are old patterns, et cetera, et cetera. And like oil and water, if you just leave it, they'll separate on their own. But we're
Right.
sitting here just shaking our jars up all the time, and
Right.
wanting clarity, but we don't know how to just sit back and, allow the oil and water to separate all on its own.
Yeah.
We don't even have to do anything about it.
Yeah,
It
Alan Watts talks about that. There's a quote or a talk that he gave. I'm a real fan, and
Me too. Me too.
he's amazing, or he is amazing. Uh, wherever he is, he's amazing. Um, but he talked about water, how to clear muddy water, just leave it alone. And that nature has an inherent wisdom if we'll just line up with that. Let's talk about nature a little bit. I'm a bit of a philosophical Taoist. I really adhere to, or try to. I'm an aspirant. I aspire to adhere to the Tao, but the wisdom of nature,
Mm.
because that's a big thing for you. Can we talk about that a little bit? Like you've spent a lot of time in nature.
Yes, yes, I've spent a lot of time in nature. And I have come to the conclusion that nature is not outdoors.
Right.
Nature is it's all nature. I can't separate myself from nature, right? I
Right.
had this romantic idea of what nature was, going out in the woods, really
Mhm.
being in nature. And there's value to that. Don't get me wrong. There's a lot of distractions in our modern world that out in the forest are simply not there.
Mhm.
Um, but this is also nature. Cities are nature. I can't be separated from nature.
No.
And that was a big aha moment for me because I wanted to do all these things out in the woods and be
Mhm.
alone out in the woods and do these things and realize that I can still grow wherever I'm at. And
Mhm.
the process of me unfolding, the process of April unfolding
Mhm.
is is something I don't know what that looks like. And so
Mhm.
the more again, it's like more I start planning, okay, well, I'm going to go and do a lot of growth in this area of my life by
Mhm.
going out to the woods or going out into nature. It's like, well, I can do that anywhere. And if it's just me getting back into the driver's seat instead of like, where's my karma really need to unfold? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And playing that game, it's analogous to me, April, to lucid dreamers. Lucid
Mm.
dreamers, when people first start lucid dreaming, they want to explore all these fun things, whether they start flying, they'll start doing all these fun adventures in their dreams. And then at some point that becomes boring to them. And they
Mhm.
just want to be the witness and see how it unfolds all on its
Right.
own. And
Right.
that's what I'm doing right now is just trying to sit back and see how this unfolds. And it's not always how I want it. In fact,
Right.
most of the time it's not how I want it.
Right.
But when I do let go and surrender to whatever my own karmic unfolding is, things definitely go easier and there's more
Yeah.
miracles, there's more synchronicities, and it's more fun. It's just more
Yes.
fun.
Yeah, the Tao has the nature or the notion of aimlessness because the purpose to be here is just being here.
Mhm.
And I love that because our culture conditions us to believe that we must define a goal, we must have like a purpose, but I think that the purpose appears as you walk the path. I don't think it's
I agree.
necessarily and it can go in a lot of different directions and converge all in the same place. Um,
Yes.
there's the yin and yang of that, the water course way, everything is just kind of flowing, and then the structure, the container to hold that. And it's, yeah, I feel like, when we allow life to live us,
Yeah, I like the way you put that. When we allow life to live us, it's trying to live through us.
right? Well, and then this idea that somehow we're separate from nature and we need to overcome and dominate nature, when what we're doing is we're part of nature, so we're kind of overcoming and dominating ourselves. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Uh, but
No.
but that's kind of the road we're on.
Yeah, and everyone's gotta find their own way. No one can walk the path for anyone else.
That's right.
And that that's such a weight that was off me that lifted, sometime, years ago, but during this journey was wow, I don't need to like push anything on to anyone else or think that
Mhm.
my idea of how to live is the idea, is the right way. And I think that
Right.
happens to a lot of, I guess, people waking up in the beginning. They find something that resonates with them and it helps them. And they have this natural inclination to want to share that, and it comes from a
Yes,
really good place.
it does.
But they haven't yet understood how idiosyncratic their karma is.
Right.
And that thing worked for you, but
Mhm.
that not might be working for anyone else in that way.
Yeah. That's very Western. You know, a teacher of mine talks about demographic swamping. And, the idea that everybody needs to be saved and we need to be the one to get them the message. But in reality, like you said, everybody has their own journey
Right.
and their own trajectory and the way that the way they're going to live out their movie is could
Yeah.
be remarkably different than yours. And it's a respecting and honoring of their path.
Yes.
If we could do that for one another, uh, you know, I don't want to be hokey and say we'd have world peace, but I think we would. in terms of like, focus on our own path
Sure.
and respect and honor the paths of others.
It's true. And that world peace is attainable. I see, for me, it's my experience is so narrowed down now
Hmm.
that what I'm experiencing first-handedly, that's it.
Yeah,
That's all that exists for me, essentially. You know,
good.
whatever's going on in Ukraine, this, that, or the other, that's not real to me.
Right,
That's a movie being played on, whether it's happening or not, doesn't make a difference to me. It's
right,
not here.
right.
It
It's not now
it's a
for you.
distraction for me. And so
Yeah.
there's there can be peace in one's individual life. One can experience world peace. The more they experience peace inward, that just starts to reflect outward, regardless of what's happening wherever.
And
No.
there's a sort of contagiousness to that.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
I notice that a lot when I'm around people like yourself that are just kind of really centered, very grounded, doing their own thing. It's refreshing. It's
Hmm.
like, ooh, I want to feel that. I want to be fully present in my body. I want to be connected to nature. I want to be connected, embodied as a human
Yes.
being instead of have
Yes.
my mind in 20 different places. That's just madness.
Yeah, it
So,
is.
yeah. So, talk to me about purification of the mind. What does that mean
Mm.
when you say that?
That's my favorite topic, I think, right there.
Oh, yay.
And
Good.
when I say mind, I don't separate the mind and the body. They're complex that are, the more I go deep into it,
Mhm.
on the surface it seems like they're two different things, but as I go deeper, they're the same thing.
Right.
Um, Purification of the mind is, okay, let me backtrack here.
Okay. Take your time.
We all come into this incarnation with baggage,
Mm,
with karma, with old patterns, and
right.
with reactivity.
Mhm.
And our minds are constantly using reactivity for fuel. That's how they
Mhm.
operate. And so we're constantly reacting at deep levels, creating more fuel, creating more existences, creating more suffering. And the process of purification is stopping that process and reversing that.
Okay.
So when we're in our thinking minds, and our mind is very layered, I'll say.
Mhm.
So we might feel peaceful even on the surface. We might not have any thoughts on our surface, but that doesn't mean that below the surface, where a lot of the matter of the iceberg is, that
Mhm.
there's still reactivity going on. There's churning
Right.
going on, even at those deep levels. We
Mhm.
just can't process that because our minds aren't sharp enough in that moment to actually be aware of what's going on in those deep
Mhm.
levels.
Mhm.
So the process of purification is essentially learning how to be present, feel deeper,
Mhm.
and when we're not reacting, it's like our mind is fasting. So when our physical body fasts, say we
Mhm.
stop eating food,
Mhm.
we go to our reserves. We go to our fat reserves, we go to old cells, we go and scavenge what we can do to keep going. And the
Right.
mind is no different, except the mind needs something every single moment. So when we stop reacting, it's going to go to old karma,
Huh.
old stores, and it starts eating that up. Old old patterns, old reactivity, and
Yeah.
that can be unpleasant at times, or it can be
Mhm.
pleasant. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter. Like, when I say reactivity, I'm not speaking about totally negative things. There's wholesome
Right.
karma too.
Sure.
So getting to that point where we're just practicing every day, every moment, basically, to be in the moment and
Mhm.
allow whatever's arising to arise, because that's how we get rid of older stuff. And so when we stop reacting, new chunks of old stuff start coming up to be processed and used. And
Right.
that can look very unpleasant within the mind. You might have crazy thoughts. That
Yeah.
you're like, what? I don't even, why did I even think of that? Or it
Yeah.
might be very pleasant, something that just feels very good. It doesn't matter. The
Mhm.
point is, we're not reacting to whatever's unfolding.
Right.
So we start getting good at that, and bigger chunks start coming up, old stores, and we actually start lightening our load.
Wow.
And when we start lightening our karmic load, our whole energetic blueprint starts changing. Now, our karma was going in this direction, and now it's going in this direction. We dealt with a bunch of stuff now. Now we're going into new territory and new layers and
Mhm.
harder tests and harder challenges. Um, and that's essentially it. And for me, that looks like that's definitely meditating. That's trying to be more meditative throughout the day, really
Mhm.
integrate that in my own life. Not just
Right.
I'm not just a person who sits down and meditates and okay, that's it. I
Mhm.
don't, I did my thing for the day. I'm good. No, it's
Right.
really about where I'm taking it day to day and my
Mhm.
relationships and my interactions and how I'm present in that.
Mhm.
And physical purification. I do a lot of that. I have a bunch of practice that I do, from fasting to um, exercise, and a bunch of different things in that realm to like kind of tackle it in that way
Mhm.
too. And so yeah,
Wow.
everyone's going to be drawn to their own practices on what that looks like, physical and mental,
Mhm.
mind purification. But that's where I'm going. That's where I want to be going,
Mhm.
because I want to know my creator. I want to know God on an experiential level. And I'm not
Yes.
talking about you know, the bearded man in the clouds, not that necessarily, but I do think there's a creator that's creating all of this, and I'm just one little speck of that creator, as one speck of the whole, one drop in the ocean. And I
Mhm.
want to come to the point where I'm more and more realizing I'm in the ocean and not a
Right.
separate drop in the ocean.
Yeah, that was a real impetus for my journey too, was I'd had all the religious, experiences, and they all and but I wanted to I read I'll rephrase that. I read about spiritual experiences that people had. And I didn't want to read about them anymore. I wanted to actually, and I read about them in Hebrew and Aramaic, and and it was great. I mean, but I wanted to live that. I wanted to have a firsthand experience, and I think we're meant to.
Definitely.
Um, and that's yeah, so I can definitely relate to that. And some of what you're saying almost sounds like the shadow integration that work that I do with Gene Keys, in terms of old karmic patterns and places where we've maybe received wounding, and there's places that are stuck and we can't go forward, and you're accessing those through presence and meditation, and I think that's beautiful. That is
Yeah,
really
I'm
beautiful.
trying. I'm trying. And to a note on your words, that reading about things, I find a lot of value in books and reading about them.
Sure.
But the main value they bring is to inspire us to walk our own path. That's
Oh,
it.
that's good. That's well put. That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
there's
Yeah.
really no other use for any of that kind of material unless it's inspiring us to keep walking.
Yeah, you can look at it and read through it and know everyone's stories and memorized it and quote it. But if it's not a living reality in your own life, it
Right.
just, it's like hitting that glass ceiling. It's like, okay, what now? And
Yeah.
I think, innately, as we as human beings know that we need to go deeper, that we need to go within, that we need to have that experience of experiencing the creator and
Yeah.
creation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So,
true.
yeah.
And in Buddhist theology, there's a moment when someone reaches nibbana, or the kingdom of heaven, and that moment could literally be, a hair of a second, or it could last
Mhm,
several minutes, hours, days. Um, but when that happens, that person's whole being is upgraded,
mhm.
and like an operating system, right? On a computer, the whole
Right,
operating system is upgraded, and they can no longer actually do some of the unwholesome things that they could do before.
right.
And I find that very interesting. Like, they can't, and I say nibbana, nirvana, kingdom of heaven, I think these are
Mhm.
all interchangeable.
Right.
Um, but there is a moment that you experience when you experience God. and
Mhm.
this I've read of this. I'm not sure I've experienced it in the way that they're expressing it, but
Mhm.
the whole being has changed. And they
Yes.
wake up and they come back and they can't, they have no doubt anymore. Doubt is
Right.
completely gone. You know, they
Right.
anger is completely gone. There's certain things that they're still on the path and they're not like fully liberated, fully enlightened,
Mhm.
but there are stepping stones along the way.
And maybe the role at that point is to be more of a bodhisattva, a person that's here to help humanity realize who it really is. Maybe that's,
Yeah.
'cause they've had that realization. And I think about like the masters, Buddha, Jesus, Yeshua,
Mm.
going back.
Those are my main two right there, honestly.
Yeah,
The two
yeah.
I draw the most
Lao Tzu's
inspiration from.
my main guy.
Yeah, the
Whether or
Tao is
not,
true. I don't have enough information about him as a person. I've read
yeah.
the Tao Te Ching, but I don't know enough about him as an individual.
Well, there's doubt as to whether or not he is one person or a compilation of different people.
Okay.
The Tao Te Ching is an extremely simple book. I'm sorry. Yeah. The Tao Te Ching is an extremely simple book to read. It's short, but it's profound. And so I like the simplicity of it. And I like
Mm.
that the first statement is the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao.
Right.
That's probably my very favorite
That's the
verse.
preface, right? The
Yeah,
Tao actually can't be explained. We're just gonna point fingers to it, but there's nothing that
yeah,
will ever be able to express it because
yeah,
it's ineffable. It's inexpressible. It's the
exactly.
thing that's permanent. We're living in this world that of the mind that's everything is impermanent. So all of our references are to things within it. And the Tao is outside of that.
It's
The
outside
Tao
of that.
encloses that. So there's nothing within it that would ever be able to fully, give you an idea of it.
Yeah, not from in a human perspective per se.
Right. Right.
But we know that just living a life in alignment with nature is probably as close as you're going to get in terms of and meditating and just being fully present, like what you're talking about. That's as close as we get of a mental understanding.
Right.
But an embodied understanding, your body is the Tao. I mean, nature is the Tao. It is all the Tao. It's
Yeah.
or you know whatever you want to call that. Words to me are so insufficient. We use so many of them, but they're really insufficient to describe a lot of these experiences. And I feel like that's the big disconnect is they want structure and they want logic and they want all the pieces to fit and all the i's to be dotted and the t's crossed. But when you're walking a real spiritual life, you just take that next step. You can't define all of it, you know?
Right.
It's difficult to define. So, let's talk about music because you make music.
Okay.
Tell me about what kind of music you make.
I make I sing and make hip hop music. And
Cool.
I have trouble even saying that because I rhyme in my music, but I wouldn't describe it as hip hop.
Mhm,
It's just an easy way for me to kind of get that across. But
mhm,
it's it's intense. It's very intense music. I speak and sing from my heart. It's
mhm,
definitely a powerful outlet for me. Uh, I started. I've played the guitar for some time, but I started just being more poetic. I'd done
mhm.
poetry when I was younger and actually did poetry competition, but I said, I'm just going to try this. And this was 2021. I'm going to put a full year into this and be consistent with it and just put music out and see what happens.
Right.
And I was very aware how cutthroat and the music industry is. So I was going in knowing that I'm not going to make a living out of this.
Yeah.
It's not my intention. My intention is just to just see what happens, follow the nature.
Mhm,
And I'm still doing it. It's a hobby, but I love it. It's so healing to me, April.
mhm,
A big part of my growth is within like unlocking my throat, and
mhm.
that helps me open it up on a consistent basis,
Yeah.
keep it open, and really start moving some of the garbage and blockages that I had in my throat out.
Mm. Yeah.
And I love it. The writing process, the recording process. Um, is very cathartic for me. And I have all my music on Spotify.
Really?
I did a bunch of music videos. Yeah, I had the whole process of editing the videos. It's just such a fun
What?
creative process
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, I'll have to find that and link to it, in the notes because 'cause I'd like to check it out. I love poetry, and I think and I think music is poetry, and the cool thing about music too, and I might be wrong about this, but it stimulates certain, uh, parts of our brain that
Oh
cause
yeah.
us to increase neuroplasticity.
Oh, it's
Uh,
got to. It's got to.
yeah, yeah. My husband is a huge I mean, his collection is growing, growing, growing. He's huge into music, and it is the thing that he does. It helps him unwind every day coming home from work and traffic, and I just think it's such a beautiful part, of our lives. So I
Me
love that
too.
you're contributing to that. We wanna
Yeah,
definitely
I really
find that.
love it, and it's just so much fun. I'll cry at times. I'm making something, and I'll just
Mhm,
start crying.
mhm.
Um, a lot of things are moving through me in that process, and yeah,
It's
I love it.
healing.
Yeah,
It's
it
so
is.
healing. Music is so healing. I definitely do that too, and I will oftentimes pick music with the lyrics that really, communicate what I'm feeling, and you're right, it'll bring you to tears, but they're like it's the most cleansing experience, it's just
Yeah.
cleaning out all that old stuff, and the throat, you know, the throat is huge.
Yeah, it
We
really is. It
Yeah.
opens up, like, just so much, the connecting my heart and my head, or my
Mhm.
heart and my head, and just, like, that was just blocked, and now things can move much more freely. It was a big
Mm.
unlock for me. And it was just a lot
Creativity.
of vulnerability, it's not it's deeply uncomfortable sometimes. One, just voicing things that are,
Yeah.
your truth that you might to yourself is uncomfortable, let
Yeah.
alone putting myself out there, creating a music video where I'm not only like sharing it to you, but I'm owning it. I'm really owning
Yes.
what I'm saying.
Yes.
And that was a great exercise just to get comfortable with being vulnerable, you know,
Mhm.
in that way.
Right.
Now I could, if I'm posting that kind of stuff, in my day-to-day life, I don't much care about what you think of me. I've looked at me so deeply. I know the bullshit that I
Right.
have. There's
Right.
nothing you're gonna tell me that's new to me that I haven't
Yeah.
looked at already under a microscope. And so
Exactly.
that process of just opening myself up to people, um, on a virtual way has really helped me in my day-to-day life be more open.
I love that. That's really beautiful. I really, really love that. So, let's switch gears here because this is one of the things that I noticed that you had when you were at the farmer's market. It's called pyrography. I'm messing
Yes.
that up again.
You're putting the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable is what
Okay.
you're doing. Pyrography is fine. Pyrography is
Pyrography. Okay. I keep
pyrography.
looking at the word and that's my mistake. So I need to not look
It's
at it.
okay.
So let's talk about that because you do some beautiful work. And what I first noticed, just as a side note, so the House the Light, one of my friends there, Linda, had showed me some of your work, which was a body graph, a human design body graph. And for those that you don't know what that is, that's basically your energy signature. And you had done a person's body graph, and
Yes.
it was beautiful. And then I saw some of the other things that you did while I was at the farmers market, and I was very impressed. But I don't understand anything about it, so I'll let you explain that.
Sure. Well, it's actually something when I was in South America for the first winter, I was in Patagonia, and the winters down there are harsh, relentless, cold, windy,
Hmm.
and it was really a time for me to hibernate. And they had a wood pen there, and so I had a bunch of like little wood discs, and I remember I would just draw things on the wood discs, and I made a big, beautiful wall piece with a bunch of connecting wood discs that
Mhm.
had a bunch of random things on them, and I enjoyed it. It was very cathartic, but I put that aside for 10 years, and just started coming back to it recently. I was working in Michigan, and I just kept, when something comes in your head,
Mhm.
it's almost like
You're
it
getting
just keeps coming.
inspired.
Like,
Yeah.
it's like, buy the wood burner, buy a nice one. And I'm so cheap sometimes that I just like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I kept putting off. This is probably a year ago, and I finally purchased it this year. I said, you know what, I'm just gonna put, the $200-300
Yeah.
investment into it, see what happens. And so I started making horse tags. I was living in a horse farm and I started making horse tags for people, and they really liked them. I'd finished them and got a couple commissions for some friends and family that wanted to support me. I was like, okay, I could do something with this. I'm really enjoying this. It's a very slow art. So talk about
Mm,
having to be present. You cannot
yeah.
rush this art. It is
Ooh,
very slow, and tedious.
mm,
And so I started doing bigger pieces, had a bunch of reclaimed wood on my property, and it's like, this is nice wood. And so I started sanding it, cutting it, making it look much more presentable. And I realized, wow, I've got something here. These are really beautiful canvases that I can work on.
mhm,
And one thing leads to another. The whole process starts evolving. I'm finishing them different ways. I'm adding acrylic paint to them.
mhm,
And now it's just it's really an enjoyable craft that I'm trying to turn into a business,
mhm.
basically, an art business. And that is leading to all sorts of challenges. How do you market it? Who do you
Right.
connect to? How do you price things? Um, it's just it's leading to a whole new set of challenges, which I love. I love the puzzle of these types of things.
Mhm.
So I'd love to just be the kind of person that can just sit there and do it all day and work on it. But I have to play all the roles in the business. You know what I mean? And so there's some weak points I have. Marketing is definitely a weaker point, and
Yeah.
going out, doing the networking, etc. So
Yeah.
farmers market helps me like kind of push me into that
Right.
networking area. But yeah, the ones you saw at the market was like generation one, and those were really beautiful to me at the time. And I look at them now and I'm like, wow, these are so elementary compared to what I'm doing now. And that's how I feel about my music too. I'll
Yeah.
listen to some of my first songs and I can't. It's just the cadence and all that. It's just it kind of makes me cringe. And but I see that I'm improving. And that's like,
You're growing. Yeah.
yeah,
That
and that's the most fun of any process is just,
Mhm,
am I improving? Am I improving in the skill? And it's just so much
mhm.
fun to improve at anything and to see I'm getting better at things and how it connects to all the different facets of my life,
Right. A
you
lot of
know?
people never start things because they're so afraid of not doing it perfectly when they begin,
I
you
know,
know?
and I have that fear, and I have to
Yeah.
for me, and if anyone listening to this, if you have that same fear, what helped me is just breaking it down into
Mhm.
the smallest steps until I get to a step that I feel comfortable in conquering.
Right.
And that little victory can lead to the next little victory. But if I'm thinking of the final product or the final goal,
Mhm.
it's way too overwhelming. Like to think,
Right.
oh, just I'm not gonna even start. That's way too much work.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be terrible at it, blah, blah, blah. And just doing any of the process helps me get over that perfectionistic idea
Mhm,
and say,
mhm.
screw it. I don't care if it looks bad now. Like, this is part of my process.
Yeah.
And some point, it does click over where that fear also gets weaker and weaker throughout
Mm.
the process.
Right. Right.
And just
Yeah.
doing it in the art, doing it with the wood burning, April, people I think should realize that if you start like an artistic endeavor or whatever it is, that will correlate to other parts of your life. So,
Right.
that fear that you were fearing about doing this piece of art or whatever it is, you start going into that more and more. That's going to affect your fear in all aspects of your life. That's going to dwindle the fear and everything else.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Now, do you mind if I mention your human design? Because you told me.
No, no, not at
Okay, so
all.
you're a manifesting generator, so you're really meant to do a lot of different things. So you're meant to have your
Yes.
irons in many fires all at the same time. And
Oh,
that's
that's good to hear, April. I'm glad. Sometimes I think being the jack of all trades, master of none, it's like
oh, that's
I
my
get
life.
worried
I,
about it
I'm a
sometimes.
jack of all trades and master of none either. And I feel similarly. The first podcast that I did, I couldn't listen to them either. I was like, oh no, that production is not good because I'm not used to being the producer, so there's a lot that's improved over time and I'm still working on it and it's okay. And I think we both want to really encourage people, just do it and go back and fix it and if you need to, but really, you're learning. We're all learning. That's what this whole experience is about, is learning. So,
Yes.
But
It's
yeah,
true.
you
Well, you've definitely come. I haven't listened to your older podcast, but I feel like you're a very skilled interviewer and conversationalist that knows how to transition into things very well and keep a present attention. So I appreciate the conversation.
well, you're pretty easy to talk to. I mean, you have a lot to share, which is really great. But it's something that I've had to kind of really work on because I didn't start out, you know, being able to do it very well. Or I guess a lot of it's just listening, and trying to pay attention and pick out things that you hear people saying, and get them to kind of expand on that a little bit more. But I'm very excited about what you're offering, and I'm definitely going to put links to this underneath the show notes. Is there anything else you want to discuss before we close?
I think, gosh, if you'd be willing to give me just a little advice on my human design and
Yeah.
how to connect with that emotional authority more, I'd really
Okay.
appreciate that.
Oh, so you're an emotional manifesting generator. Is that right?
I think sacral,
Oh,
is that right?
sacral. Okay, so you're not emotional. Well, you're sensitive, very sensitive, but you're not emotion is not how you make decisions. Sacral for you is pretty immediate. And it is a guttural knowing that comes out in a sound. So it's not, you want to answer yes or no questions, not with yes or no, but with uh-huh or uh-uh, and just really feel into that. It's in the sacral itself. So it comes across as uh-huh. I'll give you a good story. My husband is he has sacral authority. So I go to the farmer's market every Saturday and he likes the pastries there. The one in particular called a Napoleon that the French bakery lady does that he just loves. But he didn't really want to go this morning, and I know his authority. I don't have sacral authority, but he does. And I for a minute forgot that, and I asked him an open-ended question. I said, "Do you want anything at the farmer's market?" And he looked at me like I had three eyes. Okay, so when you have sacral authority, open-ended questions are not good. You want people to get straight to the point, and it needs to be a yes or no question.
Right. I
And so I
was
went,
looking at you like I had 3 eyes too right now. I think I was, like, totally connecting with what he was feeling.
yeah, because I have what's called ego or heart authority, and it's all about me talking, and my stories go all over the place. But he wants, let's cut to the chase. And so I looked at him and I thought, "Oh, I forgot." Like we look at others as we look at ourselves.
Right.
And I forgot for a moment that what I had just done in asking him that open-ended question. I said, "Do you want a pastry from the farmer's market?" And he knows how to use his sacral authority. He goes, "Uh-huh."
Uh-huh. That's
So
right.
so I knew that. So with when I speak to him, I ask him questions that are yes or no, and he can access a very clear uh-huh or uh-uh. But if I was to ask him a question and he was to answer it with a yes or no, he could say something that was not true. So if I said, "Do you like this sweater?" and he didn't, he would say, "Yeah, that's fine." But he could never say uh-huh if he didn't really believe that.
Right.
So the truth is found in the gut knowing, and it's very connected to sound. He loves music, you love music. I mean, there's a connection to sound with the sacral, and it has this energy that really needs to burn itself out every day so that you can sleep soundly. You have you have restore you have energy to burn constantly. Some people need to
Yes.
rest before they go to sleep. You can literally work if you're doing something that is satisfactory to you. You can do it from sun up to sundown and just pass
Yep.
out.
Yep. It's true.
Exercise is great for you, but it's a beautiful thing. Your truth is in the moment for what you're looking towards. But 2, 3 minutes, 2 days, 2 weeks later, it may not necessarily be as accurate because we're always fluctuating and changing. So, you as a sacral authority, you need to practice with that sound.
Right. And that no, and it makes sense. It's something I've learned kinda just on my own, not
Mhm.
with the uh-huh, uh-huh, but I've noticed that when I'm not speaking my truth or that it's something that I don't really wanna say or do, my voice lifts an octave. and
Yeah.
it feels like it's coming from more up here.
Yeah.
Whereas if I say my truth, it's definitely coming from all the way, like, yeah,
Down in the
down
sacral.
here.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's where your inner authority is found, and your strategy is to wait to respond because with being a sacral authority, you're actually drawing things to you to respond to.
Nice.
So no
Yes.
forcing, no pushing, no making, waiting to respond to things. They'll come to you and then you need to respond to them. But you're not really here to force things. Although you do have this manifesting ability or initiating ability, you need to do it in response to what comes to you. And then just
Right.
inform people around you that might be impacted by your choices, what you're doing, and that will decrease the amount of resistance that you might feel. And that's the manifesting generator with a sacral authority.
Wow. Well, I may need to get a reading from you at some point and follow up
Okay.
because I've had one before, but it was not as succinct and clear as what you've just stated in 5 minutes. So,
Well, there's a lot of depth to human design and Gene Keys, and that was very general. But that's really the most important thing I can tell anybody is really practice your strategy and authority. You'll find less resistance in life. You'll find satisfaction with what you're doing, and life just moves a lot more smoothly when you're accessing those tools. But there's things like profile, incarnation, cross. I mean, it just goes and goes and goes. But I really do give people a lot of detail because, and then I give them a report so they can refer back to it because they're never going to remember everything that I
right.
tell
It's a
them.
big download. I mean, yeah,
It
you need to
is.
go back into the files and remember
Yeah.
what was
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a process, but the outcome is similar to what you were talking about earlier, which is deconditioning.
Yeah,
Those getting rid of those things that are part of us that are not really part of us, and getting back to our original factory settings, the layers of conditioning, the expectations, the cultural expectations, societal, the what the who the media tells us we should be, all those things that contribute to making us not us. So that's what it's all about. But that's just a brief. But you're doing all the right things as a manifesting generator. You're dipped in all sorts of things. I mean, and that's really what you all can do. You can multitask like nobody's business. And
beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
you're welcome. You're welcome. It's a
And
good
it
thing.
helps. Yeah, no, it helps me to wait to respond and just be reminded of that because it's crazy what I'll manifest exactly what I need and I'm not even thinking about it. But when I start trying to like get it done and do the thing, it's just
Mhm.
like it's just not happening, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Force is just not really, even manifestors who can initiate have a sort of waiting process in that they need to be aligned correctly before they initiate. So it's an important thing to be correct in your body, and you can feel that as tension or resistance,
Mhm.
and it's like, okay, that's not for now, or that's not correct for me. I mean, when you really start to feel into your body, which you have done a lot of, you can kind of get a good idea of what's correct. So
I'm inspired.
it's fabulous. It's a really wonderful tool, and I highly recommend it. But this has been so interesting, and I can't wait to post this. And everybody, you need to look at his work because he is a master. I mean, you're really, really good, and I want everybody to
Thank
know what
you.
you're doing.
I appreciate that, April. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the time.
My pleasure. You have a great day, and thanks everybody for joining us. And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
I'll see you Saturday.
All right, great.